What's going on YouTube? This is Venomous Media, back with another video. In 1993, we entered a park full of dinosaurs. We were sent to Mars to fight demon aliens, and we saw teenagers with attitude fight evil with prehistoric machines, and so much more. I mean, what a year it was for pop culture. So what about Marvel or DC? Did they have anything going on that year? Unfortunately, Marvel sat that year out. DC didn't have any live action films going on, but they did have the awesome animated film, Batman: The Mask of Phantasm. So were there any live action films based on comics in 1993 at the box office? Well, yes, actually there was. 2 to be exact. First, Dennis the Menace, if you count comic strips, which was surprisingly a box office hit and featured several iconic actors from the 80s and 90s. And the second one is actually the subject of today's video, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Whether your Ninja Turtle journey started with the Mirage comics in 1984 by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, or the beloved animated series in 1987, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, heroes in a half-shell, turtle power. The Turtles were on fire and going strong, which they still are to this very day in the comics and animation department. Although the quality of some of the adaptations after the 2003 series and 2007 movie are debatable. Anyway, the Turtles didn't just stop at comics and cartoons. There were games at the arcade and home consoles. Heck, there was even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cereal and snack pies from Hostess. And of course, Mikey, Raph, Leo, and Donnie eventually found themselves on the big screen by way of New Line Cinema. First in 1990, which the first TMNT movie was both a critical and financial success, being praised by critics and fans alike for staying true to the Mirage comics while throwing in a little bit of the cartoon in there as well. To this day, the first Ninja Turtles movie is still one of my favorite comic movies and one of my favorite movies period, because of the plot, action, humor, and casting of April, Casey, and the Turtles themselves, especially Raph. Damn! Then in 1991, we got TMNT 2, The Secret of the Ooze, which was met with mixed reviews. Like I mentioned, the first one we got praised for staying true to the comics, while Secret of the Ooze felt more like the cartoon and strayed further away from the comics, as the movie was much lighter in tone compared to the first one. However, it's still considered a solid sequel among the Turtle fan base, me included. I mean, come on, we got Big Daddy Cool as Super Shredder. And even Vanilla Ice gave us this banger. And despite the mixed reception, it went on to make nearly $80 million at the box office on a $25 million budget, and apparently did well in video sales as well. So yeah, Donnie, Mikey, Raph, and Leo would live to fight another day on the big screen with TMNT 3. Of course, it was panned by critics and fans, and has a 4.8 on IMDb. However, I'm probably one of the few people that actually enjoyed it. Not as much as the first two, but it was still fun and I watched it all the time growing up. And even as an adult, I still enjoyed it. So without further ado, let's get into this. The third Ninja Turtle movie was directed and written by Stuart Gillard, who had been working as a writer, director, and producer since the mid-70s. Some of his writing credits include Three's Company and Mork and Mindy, which if you don't know, that was Robin Williams' first major role that would lead him to stardom. And as far as directing goes, he mostly had some credits in lesser-known shows and lower-budget movies, one of them being the 1982 movie Paradise with Phoebe Cates. Even post-TMNT 3, his credits consist of Disney Channel movies and CW shows. Now onto the cast, which included Paige Turco reprising her role of April O'Neil from the second movie, which she replaced Judith Hogg. Elias Koteas made his return as Casey Jones after Casey was omitted from the second movie. He's also playing double duty this time around, also playing a prisoner in feudal Japan. I'll get more into that later. For the Turtles themselves, Brian Tochi and Robbie Rust returned to voice Leo and Mikey, being the only actors to voice their Turtles in all 3 movies. And of course, Corey Feldman returned as Donnie after being recast in the second movie. And Tim Keller voiced Raph. Here's a fun fact. Canadian voice actor Matt Hill, who you might know as Ed from Ed, Edd n Eddy, and of course from his anime work like Inuyasha and Ronin Warriors, he was the suit actor for Raphael, and will go on to voice Raph in the next Mutation TV series. And I'll briefly go back to that later. And James Murray replacing Kevin Clash as Splinter. The rest of the cast included Vivian Wu, Sab Shimano, and character actor Stuart Wilson. Now on to the premise. The movie starts off in feudal Japan. A young prince named Kenshin, who's the son of a warlord named Norinaga, is being chased by some of his father's samurai, while a woman named Mitsu from a nearby village watches everything. Then a time jumps to the present day New York, where the turtles are goofing off in their hideout as usual. They get a visit from April, who tells them she is going on vacation. But before she goes, she gives them gifts. She also mentions that she picked out a gift for herself, a scepter. Then the movie goes back to Japan, where Lord Norinaga confronts Kenshin for leaving their castle, and Kenshin reveals he's against his father for starting a war, which Norinaga has hired a British mercenary named Walker to supply him with guns and cannons. And soon Kenshin finds a scepter located within the castle and activates it, sending him to present-day New York and April to feudal Japan. While in Japan, April is jailed and meets a British prisoner named Whip, who she thinks strangely looks like Casey Jones. And speaking of Casey, back in the present day, he makes his return after being MIA in the previous movie to assist the turtles in figuring out how to get April back home. They decide to use April's scepter. They are sent back to Japan, while 4 of Lord Norinaga's samurai are sent to the present for Casey and Splinter to deal with. But the turtles only have 60 hours to rescue April, or they'll be trapped in feudal Japan forever. While in Japan, the turtles meet Mitsu and learn that she, along with her village, are rising up against Lord Norinaga and his army. So in addition to finding April, the turtles are now caught in the war themselves and will have to help Mitsu and her village fight the evil warlord. So that was the premise. Now, this would normally be the part where I talk about the source material. And it's a real interesting case here, because technically the story is very, very loosely based on issues 46 and 47 of the Mirage series, a 2-part saga called Mask, where the turtles go to feudal Japan and even do battle with samurai. But all they really adapt is the very basic concept of the story, as it plays out very differently. In the comics, the turtles stumble across a Japanese man in the present day, who they learn is from feudal Japan. Of course, like the movie, they use a scepter that April is in possession of, but she seems to know a little bit more about it here compared to the movie, and goes with the turtles willingly. However, that's where the source material stops, as there are no characters from the storyline outside the turtles, April and Splinter. Notably missing is a lizard warrior named Choot, who fights and later becomes an ally to the turtles. And the big bad for that story was the time-traveling foe, Savante Romero, who has set up shop in Japan and taken over an army. And of course, Casey Jones was in the storyline, but I was alright with them including him in the movie since he was MIA in the second movie, and I was just glad to see him return in some fashion. Anyway, yeah, that's not the movie we got, which I guess may have been hard to adapt back then, but yeah, overall, that was the source material that was used. Now I will go on to the costumes for the turtles, which in my opinion, they still got it. The suits look great and haven't lost their edge. However, I do think when the turtles are dressed like samurai, they look very goofy, but at least we've seen how the turtles would look as samurai in the comics. Now I will talk about the action. For a movie set in feudal Japan and our titular heroes being ninjas, well, it wasn't all that action-packed. The little action we got is fine, but yeah, it was lacking this time around compared to the last 2 movies. Now I'm going to discuss my biggest problems with this movie, before I say anything else that I like about it. Like I mentioned earlier, the second movie was much lighter in tone compared to the first movie. Well, this one's even more campy. Yes, there are guns shown, but no one's actually killed with a firearm. Also, the most intense scene we see is a child being trapped in a burning house, which Mikey saves and Leo gives CPR to. And the villains themselves are bland, generic, and not very threatening, despite Walker and Norinaga being played by character actors who could pull off villains. But I blame the script rather than their performances. Also, while the premise of the movie had potential, the execution was poor. And honestly, the turtles being sent to feudal Japan to fight samurai should be box office gold. But unfortunately, this didn't feel like a big blockbuster event. And the next year, we got The Mask and the Crow, which had similar budgets to TMNT 3, and gave us that blockbuster experience. And speaking of The Mask, that movie did a 180 with the source material, and it's still considered a classic to this date. TMNT 3 honestly felt more like a low-budget sequel that had very little chance of being good. However, with all that being said, I did enjoy the movie, as basic as it was compared to the previous movies, and even other comic movies from around this time. I still had fun and consider this a guilty pleasure of mine that I can watch from time to time. The turtles themselves are awesome in it. They still got everything that makes them great that we saw in the last 2 movies, from their charisma and humor. They don't miss a point, of course. Splinter, April, and Casey were great too, especially Casey. I mean, like I said before, it was nice for him to make his return. Although I wish he had more screen time, but Elias Koteas was pulling double duty, playing both Casey and Whip. Overall, the cast did a fine job with what they were working with, and I'll briefly talk about the soundtrack now. Not much of note outside of the banger Can't Stop Rockin' by ZZ Top. However, there was a pretty cool cover of the Gloria Estefan song Conga. Now, despite this being considered the weakest entry of the three Turtle movies, it did make almost $55 million on a $21 million budget. Not a hit like the last two, but enough to keep the lights on so the Turtles could hopefully live to fight another day on the big screen. Which, after this movie, Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman began coming up with a story for a fourth movie, titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, The Footwalks, again, and later being called The Next Mutation, supposedly aiming for a 1996 theatrical release with some toys to coincide with the movie. But sadly, the Turtles' fourth outing on the big screen never came to be. A premise for the fourth movie has never officially been stated, but there have been little details here and there that have leaked online about what we could have expected, like the Turtles and Splinter going through transformation. There would have been alternate evil versions of April and Casey, possibly with a post-apocalyptic setting for the movie, possibly having a darker tone, and something more in line with the comics. The fourth movie would have also featured a fifth turtle named Kirby as an homage to comic legend Jack Kirby, but whether or not he would have been a friend or foe to the Turtles is unknown. Now, there is concept art of the unmade Turtles movie by Kevin Eastman, and of course 3 drafts of the script were sold at an auction held by Eastman, which have yet to surface online as of 2024. Like I mentioned before, the fourth title had been changed to The Next Mutation. Well, interestingly enough, The Next Mutation would later be adapted to a live-action Saturday morning TV series in 1997 on Fox Kids called TMNT, The Next Mutation, which saw Matt Hill return as Raphael, but voicing him instead of being the suit actor.
So, you wanna play?
And fun fact, we got a 5th turtle on this show. Not Kirby, but a female turtle named Venus de Milo. So yeah, The Next Mutation was another guilty pleasure of mine, so comment down below if I should reflect on it. So yeah, we saw the Turtles return live action onto the small screen, but what about the big screen? In 2014, Michael Bay brought the Turtles back to the big screen, which honestly was another guilty pleasure of mine. Anyway, Bay's reboot went on to be passable at the box office. Then we got TMNT 2, Out of the Shadows, but sadly lightning would not strike twice. Even with the help of Green Arrow, Uncle Ruckus, and the Celtic Warrior himself. So in 2018, yet another TMNT reboot was announced. And it wouldn't be until 2021 until we finally got an update about the new Turtles movie. And it's like our prayers had been answered, because the upcoming movie will be an R-rated adaptation of The Last Ronin. And of course, we're getting a game based on The Last Ronin as well, so yeah, even when the going gets tough, you can't keep the Turtles down. So hopefully everything works out with The Last Ronin movie, because there's so much potential with The Last Ronin movie if done right. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about TMNT 3. Did you like the movie? If so, what did you like about it? If not, what didn't you like? Also, are you excited for the upcoming live-action Last Ronin movie with an R rating? Also, comment down below if you have any suggestions for my next retrospect, whether it be another comic movie, a movie period, a game, or a TV show. I would love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. This is Venomous Media signing off.